Let's go, Commanders! Today, Adam Peters went out to the market and signed a piece we've been asking for a while, a veteran cornerback with a Super Bowl ring, and in a minute I'll explain why this signing carries a lot more weight than the contract number suggests. But that's not the only thing we've got today. We also have to talk about the soap opera nobody saw coming. Brandon Ayuk, the receiver half the DMV assumed was landing in Washington, decided to torch that bridge with a direct shot at Jaden Daniels, mama and all. And to close things out, I want to talk about 3 names who could be the difference between a defense that's still a punchline and a defense that starts scaring people. This one's a lot, fam. Let's get into it. Okay, fam, walk with me slowly on this one because this signing looks small on paper. 1 year, up to $3.8 million. But once you put it in the right context, you'll understand why this is the most important move Adam Peters made this week. Let's break it down layer by layer because that's where the real value is. The base situation, why this position has hurt us for so long. The Commanders have gone literally 2 decades without a Pro Bowl cornerback. Think about it, since D'Angelo Hall back in 2010, and no All-Pro at the position since Darrell Green in 1991, 35 years ago. 35 years, bro. That's not a bad stretch, that's a structural generational drought from a franchise that in other eras used to take pride in its secondary, and in 2025, that story felt worse than ever. The defense finished ranked 32nd in the league, dead last, and a big chunk of that collapse came directly from a secondary that couldn't hold coverage when the pass rush wasn't getting there in time. The specific signing, who Rasul Douglas is, and what he brings. According to ESPN's Adam Schefter, the Commanders reached a 1-year agreement with Douglas, a deal that can max out around $3.8 million. Let's get into the numbers, because we need to analyze this with a cool head, not cheap hype. Douglas has 9 seasons in this league. He was drafted by the Eagles in the 3rd round back in 2017, won a Super Bowl as a rookie with that same team, and since then has played for Carolina, Las Vegas, Green Bay, Buffalo, and last season with Miami, where he started 13 of 15 games he played. In that stretch with the Dolphins, he produced 62 tackles, 1 sack, 2 interceptions, 13 passes defended, and a forced fumble. Those are the numbers of a solid rotational piece, not a superstar, and I need to say that up front so we don't build up false expectations. Now, the part I find most revealing from a scouting angle, PFF had actually put him on their bounce back candidates list heading into 2025, precisely because he was coming off a rough 2024 with the Bills, where his overall coverage grade ranked among the worst of any qualifying corner in the league. And what Douglas did was exactly what you want from a proud veteran. He bounced back with Miami and got to age 32 still playing starter level football. That tells me something real about the character we're bringing into Ashburn, something the cold numbers don't always capture. The real problem this signing is trying to patch. Here's the uncomfortable part that needs to be said out loud. Trey Amos, our 2nd round corner from 2025, is still rehabbing a fractured fibula with no confirmed return timeline. He didn't even participate in mandatory minicamp, which honestly worries me heading into the season. If Amos isn't ready by September, Washington's secondary is left with a real hole at outside starting corner in the exact year Jaden Daniels and this offense are trying to make the jump toward a Super Bowl. Douglas isn't the magic fix to that problem. He's the insurance against that problem. And that distinction matters a lot for understanding the real message behind this signing, the alternative Peters passed on, and why it matters. Here's something not enough people are talking about. The free agent cornerback market this summer wasn't exactly loaded with immediate impact options after the first wave of March signings. Peters basically had 2 paths: overpay for a flashier name in an already inflated market, or go find real value in a proven veteran with a ring, with zone man system experience, willing to sign cheap because he knows he still has to prove the 2024 dip was the exception and not the new normal. Peters chose the second path, and to me, that decision speaks to front office discipline, not settling. You don't burn unnecessary cap resources out of panic when you can solve the problem with patience and smart bounce back scouting. The quiet rival, the teams that missed out on Douglas, Miami, the very team Douglas left, had a real need at the position after losing depth in their secondary, and several reports indicated other AFC teams were tracking his signing as a low-cost option. The fact that Washington moved fast and closed this without it turning into a bidding war tells me Peters had this name identified for weeks. Not that this was a last-minute panic reaction. To me, that's the mark of a front office doing its homework ahead of time. My personal take on what happens next. I'll be direct. I think Douglas ends up starting for at least the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, simply because Amos's timeline doesn't line up to be ready from week 1. And I think Douglas, in a Durante Jones scheme that leans on aggressive coverages and veteran instincts to play fearless football, has a real bounce-back year, similar to what he had with Miami. He's not going to be a Pro Bowler, let's be realistic, but he's going to be exactly the kind of reliable player who keeps this secondary from being dead last in the league again. Look, I could be wrong, but to me, this signing speaks more to smart risk management than headline ambition. And on a team sitting in a contention window with Jaden Daniels, managing risk in the secondary matters just as much as any flashy receiver trade. What this means for us as fans, it means Adam Peters keeps building this franchise brick by brick without needing to make national headlines. Not every signing has to be a cover story to matter. This is exactly the kind of move that separates teams who sustain contention windows from teams who waste them by not patching the small holes in time. Does it fully solve the position's historic problem? No. We still need that true elite number 1 corner who takes away the opponent's best weapon every single Sunday. But it's a real, calculated, necessary step. And today, that's enough for me. Okay fam, take a breath with me for a second, because what's coming next is a completely different chapter, and this one's a lot. While Peters was quietly solving the secondary, a mess blew up on social media that probably just closed the door on another one of this roster's needs, the receiver spot. Let's rebuild the full timeline, because the context is what turns this from internet gossip into a story with real consequences. Brandon Ayuk has spent months, literally months, dropping hints that he wants out of San Francisco, and this is a completely public pattern documented by several reporters. Friction with his head coach, tension with the front office, and a relationship with his own teammates that, being generous, you'd call strained. In the middle of all that noise, there was a storyline that actually made football sense. Adam Peters was in San Francisco's front office when the Niners drafted Ayuk. He knows him, knows the talent. Add the Jaden Daniels factor on top. Ayuk and Daniels were college teammates at Arizona State. A real friendship, not something manufactured for the cameras. Reporting from serious people, like Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, had been saying Daniels wanted Ayuk on the roster, and that Peters would probably grant that wish with a cheap 1-year deal. So what went wrong? Absolutely everything in the span of 1 weekend. Ayuk posted a string of Instagram stories directly tagging Daniels' account. In the video, a visibly heated Ayuk basically tells Daniels that if he's going to be on his team, he's going to have to follow his rules, and that it's time to stop hiding behind his mama so people can start believing what he says. That's a line built to humiliate, not to joke around. And what makes this even stranger is the apparent trigger. According to Florio's reporting, this whole thing kicked off because a 49ers fan at a World Cup match got in Daniels' face yelling insults referencing Ayuk, and Daniels simply smiled and laughed it off. Ayuk, instead of matching that same calm, followed up with a second silent video showing a pair of cleats with graphics referencing Daniels' jersey number. Jaden Daniels didn't stay quiet, but he didn't get in the mud either. According to Nikki Javala's reporting, Daniels responded by posting an image of Kevin Durant looking up with a double thumbs down, no words. And then, the most telling move of all, Daniels unfollowed Ayuk on Instagram. For anyone who understands how this generation of players operates, that's the modern version of cutting communication completely. My read without sugarcoating it, this has real personnel consequences. Mike Florio had already been signaling that Peters and company probably weren't going to actively chase Ayuk. And now, after this direct shot at the one guy who was supposed to be his best argument for getting to Washington, the read gets even clearer. Ayuk just took his own best path back to relevance in this league and set it on fire with his own hands. This isn't some random player beefing with a stranger online. This is a receiver who already burned bridges with his head coach, his general manager, his own teammates, his own agent, and reportedly even the players' union. And now, out of every possible target, he chooses to publicly attack the franchise quarterback of the one team that actually made sense for his career. Look, I could be wrong, but I don't think Ayuk is thinking clearly right now. This isn't strategy. This is a man sabotaging himself in real time, and we're all watching it happen in slow motion. What does this mean for us as fans? First, the fantasy of seeing Ayuk in burgundy and gold probably died this weekend. Second, and this matters more to me from a locker room culture standpoint, Jaden Daniels just sent a quiet but crystal clear signal that he's not going to let outside drama contaminate what he's building inside this building. And honestly, fam, as a fan, that means more to me than seeing Ayuk in our jersey ever would have. Daniels didn't yell, didn't make a scene, he just cut the connection and kept moving, franchise leadership maturity over any other possible reaction. And speaking of unfinished assignments, turning into real reasons for hope, I've got to close today with 3 names that genuinely have me hyped about this defense. The Commanders' defense finished 2025 ranked 32nd in the league, dead last. So any optimism has to come with both feet on the ground, but I'll also say this with my whole chest. There are 3 players on this roster who, if they take the leap the analysis projects, can completely change the conversation around this unit. First up is Sonny Styles, the linebacker we took at pick number 7 in this draft. This kid is literally what DeRought Jones needed to install his scheme, which blends influences from Mike Zimmer and Brian Flores. Systems that depend on super versatile linebackers who can disguise where the pressure is coming from. Styles can line up as a traditional Mike, become a pass-rushing Will, and drop down as a big nickel Sam in coverage. He's the chess piece that lets Jones hide his blitz packages without sacrificing depth. He hasn't played a single professional snap yet, so we need to stay patient, but the schematic fit is about as clean as I've seen in a recent draft class. Second is Trey Amos, the same name we mentioned earlier in the Douglas story, and this one's personal for me because his 2025 story was frustrating to watch. Amos came in as a second-round corner with natural instincts that were showing up from the very first camp. His rookie season was trending upward until week 10 against the Lions, when a fractured fibula wrecked the rest of his year, leaving his coverage grade at a modest 58.8 from PFF, a number that doesn't reflect what his real level of play was before the injury. Now he enters year 2, hopefully healthy, in a DeRought Jones system that rewards exactly his frame. 6'1", high-end short area explosiveness, the purest boundary corner on this roster. If Amos enters training camp healthy, he unlocks the full ceiling of the secondary, and it turns today's Douglas signing into pure depth instead of an urgent need. And third is Mike Sainristil entering year 3. Sainristil already has 8 career interceptions in a short career, and his level of play in 2025 was directly tied to the team's pass rush performance. While Dorrance Armstrong Jr. stayed healthy, Sainristil was playing at a level comparable to corners who ended up as Pro Bowl alternates. When Armstrong went down in week 7, his coverage metrics dropped off a cliff, not because Sainristil got worse, but because without 4-man pressure, every corner on the planet struggles. And here's the reason for real hope. Adam Peters brought in Odafe Oweh, Kalavon Chason, Charles Omenihu, and Leo Chenal to rebuild that front 7. If that pass rush comes back healthy, the logic says Sainristil automatically returns to that early 2025 level. 3 stories, 3 different bets. Pure upside without real experience yet. That's Styles. Physical recovery after a brutal injury. That's Amos. And context and system more than individual skill. That's Sainristil. If all 3 hit even 70% of their projection, this defense stops being the basement of the league. And notice something important. These 3 names, plus today's Douglas signing, don't exist in a vacuum. They're part of a much bigger investment Adam Peters made this offseason across the front 7 and the secondary as a whole. DeRought Jones isn't walking into an empty roster. He's walking into a roster built specifically for his aggressive philosophy to work from week 1. And that's a wrap for today, fam. We had a little bit of everything. A quiet but necessary signing, attacking a nearly 2-decade drought in the secondary, a social media soap opera that probably just closed a door a lot of us wanted open, and 3 young names who represent this franchise's real bet on the future. Rasul Douglas shows up today giving us a real safety floor. Brandon Ayuk can go ahead and talk to himself. And Sonny Styles, Trey Amos, and Mike Sainristil remain to me the combination that starts changing this defense's story from the inside out. Raise hail always. If this video gave you something, hit that like, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments. Do you trust Rasul Douglas as a week 1 starter, or do you still think Peters owes us one bigger move at corner? I'm reading every single one. See you in the next one.